Good evening, everybody, and welcome to April 6th, 2023's episode of Songwriting Simplified with me, Jonny Lipsham, here at jonnylipshamstudios.co.uk. I hope everybody is doing well, and I hope everybody has had a fantastic start to the week as we head headlong in to Easter of 2023. Good grief, we have got there super duper fast. Now, I know that's crazy to say because in all reality, time is a constant. The Earth rotates 15 degrees per hour. Therefore, the year has gone by no faster, no slower than ever at all. It's just our perception of it changes. And certainly for me, it feels like this year is going like, like a pocket rocket. Anyway, I hope everyone's all right and has had a good one. We've got a good number of people in here already, which is fantastic. I'd love it if we could see more, but this is a pretty good group of people. So who have we got here? We've got Paul Morgan, we've got Christina with the red balloon, and we've got Billy Morgan, we've got Rich at Studio One Tots, and Shorty Beard is here as well, and Just Bob is here saying, got some stuff going on, can't make the show tonight, but have a great show. Thank you, Bob, and I hope you enjoy the replay. And we got Dwayne, and we got Kyle Dradruziak, and we got Mike from Music to Motion, and we've got Tony Cardona, and we've got Dave at Bops NY, and we got Sean White Jr., and he's got a question which we're going to answer in just a wee bit. So stay tuned. And if you've got a question, please ask it the same way that Sean has done. He has typed at Jonny Lipsham Studios at the start of his question. And that helps me see the question and pick it out from all of the conversation that goes on. So please do that. I would appreciate it. And if you're new to the show and you would like to ask a question, but you can't seem to get access to the chat, that's because it's subscriber-only chat. So if you'd like to ask your question, please hit the subscribe button and the notification bell and select all notifications, and then give it a wee minute or two, and the chat will be open to you, and you can contribute, and you can say hello to everybody. You can say hello to me, and you can ask me your songwriting question. I would appreciate that. And who else do we have? We've got Bobby Booth saying he's got a thunderstorm coming through, and Papa Raptor Music is here as well. And Billy Morgan, I think I already said. John Hathwaite is here. And we got John Lake. And we got Peter Brooks. And we got Kyle with another question as well. Which we're going to get to. I like it. That's a variation on that question. I like that, Kyle. You've thought that one through. And we got Paul Morgan as well, which is awesome. All right, so tonight's subject for discussion is instrumentation. Choosing the right instruments for your song. Because, believe it or not, choosing the wrong instrumentation for your song could destroy your song. Even if it's a really, really well-written song, you could end up wrecking the song and making the song less successful than it could be. There are lots of examples of this over the years and over the centuries where people have maybe chosen not quite the right instrumentation for their song, and they've ended up ruining a really good song. Sometimes this is down to the choice of the composer or the songwriter, or sometimes it's out of their hands and it's down to the arranger who made that choice. I've seen that happen a lot, where somebody writes a nice song that is simple, that should be, that when you hear the song, you think this song should be as spare as possible. and therefore you're looking for a thin texture. You're not looking for lots of things going on. And then the arranger has gone, oh, this is such a pretty song. This is a lovely song. I'm going to do a big band arrangement of it. And so they write it for big band. They up the tempo from 75 beats a minute to 140 beats a minute. And then they've got, you know, they got 5 trumpets all playing super high notes. And then you've got 5 trombones. And then you've got 6 saxophones. And you've got a full rhythm section. And it's just blaring. And it's, you know, it's got all the licks. It's got all the arranging tricks for writing for big band all over it. It's a brilliant arrangement. But it's destroyed the song. Because the song is simple. And the song is emotional. And the song has beautiful lyrics that need to come through. And they're being completely overrun by all of this other stuff that is going on. You know, where you've thrown the kitchen sink at it, you've thrown every arranging technique you can imagine at the song. And you've just totally destroyed it. When really all it needed was a piano, an upright bass, snare drum with brushes and a ride cymbal, and maybe a flugelhorn or a tenor saxophone obligato and the lead vocal. And that's all it needed. And the tempo back down to its nice 75 beats a minute. And now you've got plenty of space for everybody to hear the lyrics and everybody to hear the song and immerse themselves in the narrative of this song. So arrangement is key, but before you get to arrangement, choosing the instrumentation for your song could be a real deal breaker and totally change how the song sounds. And I'm going to demonstrate this for you. I'm going to play a little bit of an improvisation with a minor blues backing track that we used a few shows ago. And I'm going to improvise, first of all, on the piano, and then I'm going to switch it up to a guitar sound. It's a faked guitar sound. I'm not really playing the guitar, but I'm simulating what a guitar might be able to do with this. And you'll see that the instrumentation totally changes what the song and the mood of the music entirely. And it makes it feel very, very different. So choosing your instrumentation for your song and also choosing if you're going to have a solo in your song, what solo instrument should that be is really, really important. You know, you can totally get it right. You can totally get it wrong. Dire Straits with their beautiful ballad called Your Latest Tricks got it totally right when they hired Mike and Randy Brecker to play on that song. First of all, you have Randy playing trumpet on the freeform introduction, and then when it goes into the vamp, his brother Mike takes up the melody on the tenor sax. And then Mike plays this beautiful solo at the end of the song, kind of taking the ideas of the hook line, the melody, the interlude that keeps coming back at the end of each chorus. And he just kind of extends that a little bit. But it's only a little bit. He actually sticks fairly close to the melody. And he doesn't go like from top to bottom of the range of the instrument, and he doesn't play really, really fast runs. It's all pretty simple. So it's stylistically appropriate what he plays, but it's the instrumentation that is appropriate for the song, and it makes it perfect. And so I wonder, and you do get Mark Knopfler playing his guitar as well. So you got these 3 kind of solo instruments that are kind of taking it in turns to do things. But what if he had had a harmonica solo? Maybe he'd hired Stevie Wonder to play a chromatic harp on that particular song. Would it have worked? Or would it have destroyed the song? So that's kind of the discussion point, the debate, if you like. And it's not really a debate because the whole thing is quite subjective. But there are certain things you should avoid if you're going to, not destroy your song. So let's get with this little demonstration, and hopefully you'll get an idea of what I mean. So let's get this rhythm section vamp going, and then I'm going to play a little bit on the piano, and then I'm going to play a little bit on that sound. There. So now you've got a hint of what the two sounds are. Now it's a B flat minor blues. So there you go. I think you get the idea that if you went for the piano, you get one kind of mood, one kind of atmosphere. And then when you switch over to the guitar, okay, it's got more distortion, it's got some reverb, it's got some delay, it's got a few other things on it that the piano doesn't have. So the tone is different, and so there's a few different things about it, but it does provide a different kind of mood and a different kind of atmosphere to the song. I don't think either is wrong. I think both work. And I'm not just talking about the notes that I played fit, because they did. But which one did you prefer? Did you prefer the piano solo, or did you prefer the guitar solo? And I'm not talking about the quality of the improvisation, because neither were necessarily, first class, but they weren't bad. So that's not really up for critique. It's more, which sound did you prefer? Did you prefer the piano? Do you think that fits better for the mood of this particular song? Or do we prefer the electric guitar? Now, the electric guitar, you might think, might sit better because of the type of blues that it is, and that there's an electric piano in there. It's a little bit more of a pop blues. Therefore, maybe guitar suits better for that kind of a blues than an acoustic piano does. Some of it is going to be preference, but some of it in different circumstances for your song is going to be not just a choice of taste or a choice of preference. It also could ruin your song as well. Like, you know, if you have this nice, pretty little 1950s jazzy blues ballad, and then you introduce kind of a Hendrix-style guitar solo, I mean, that's stylistically inappropriate to start with, but it's also the wrong instrument, and it's the wrong sound for that kind of music. Maybe something like a tenor saxophone, a flugelhorn, or a Hammond organ solo would, or a piano solo indeed, would work better in that 1950s kind of a blues ballad kind of feel. Whereas this is, you know, this is much more kind of a middle of the road kind of minor blues. It's fairly simple, straightforward minor blues, you know, 3-chord trick. So I'd be interested to see your comments and see what you think, actually. So we'll discuss that for a wee while, but I am going to get to your questions as well. So don't worry about that. We'll discuss this for maybe just a few minutes, and then I will get to the questions that are already in here. But I'll be very interested to see what you have to say. Let's see. Cello. Yeah, okay. I wasn't playing cello, but there we go. John says, a good song is a good song and can take many interpretations. Yes, interpretation is definitely something to think about. And sometimes maybe a different treatment for that guitar. Maybe a cleaner guitar would have worked better than something that was a little bit more distorted, perhaps. Maybe something like a George Benson-y kind of guitar solo might have worked. For sure. Those are definitely things to think about. John says it's a great technique. John Hathwaite says it's a great technique to make a synth string section sound real. Yes, and it's actually really quite difficult to do. Especially, that kind of depends upon the quality of your string library that you're using. But also, you have to think like an arranger for a string section. You can't just like play piano voicings with a string sound and go, there, that's my string arrangement. No, you have to think much more like how a string player is really actually going to play this, and voice it for a string orchestra or for a string quartet, rather than, you know, using your piano style voicings. Those aren't really necessarily going to work. Sometimes they do, but for the most part, they don't. It's the same with writing for a horn section. You can't just do, you know, a chord voicing like this for a horn section. That's not necessarily going to sound great, and you may regret it. Now, in some contexts, that'll sound okay, but for the most of the time, it won't. Closed voicings, they do sound okay, but they can sound really muddy with a horn section. So if you want to avoid that, open voicings is the way to go. Have some you know, gaps between the notes instead of, you know, spread them out a bit. So what we got there, we got a C, we got an E flat, okay, and we got a D flat, you know. So we could go, and there you've got the skeletal structure of a D major 9 chord. And already that sounds less dissonant than that. Sometimes that works, but it doesn't always. Context is always king. John Hathwaite says, Dire Straits did a similar thing to what Jonny is talking of with Going Home, theme for a local hero. Yes, absolutely right. Yes, good point. Billy Morgan says, play it, white boy. Yeah. Thank you for that. Peter Brooks says he prefers the piano. Sean says context means a lot with instrumentation. Yes, absolutely. John Hathwaite says the guitar would have been better with less distortion. Cleaner sound would have worked. I'm more into hard rock metal, but one wouldn't have Slash playing smooth jazz. No, that's definitely true. You know, if I had, let's see, if I'd gone into that Empire and turned a few things off, like if I turned off the tube driver, the tube dreamer, and maybe this one. There's quite a lot of distortion there. Let's Let's see, is there anything else on here that I could have turned off that didn't? I could have turned the preamp down. There we go. Yeah, that might have worked. That kind of a sound might have worked better. Low notes are closer to your bottom and therefore likely more muddy when grouped together. Yeah, exactly right. So space your notes out. A lot of people think that the baritone saxophone in the horn section needs to be, playing right down in its boots. Not always. Sometimes the best horn arrangements, if you've got a baritone sax in there, is get the baritone sax quite close up with the tenor sax, and again have the tenor sax in the middle of its register. So that means the baritone sax is going to be playing quite high up, the tenor is going to be kind of in the middle, have the alto kind of playing reasonably high but not too high because you don't want it to squeak, and you don't want it to overblow, and then you can have a couple of trumpets, and then you can have one playing really high note trumpet and then the other guy kind of in the middle somewhere. That's for sure. Paul says, I like dissonance. It's a good job how I play. Yeah, dissonance is great. I love dissonance as well. But the thing with dissonance is dissonance can sound ugly if you kind of are not sure what you're doing with it. So you don't know when to use it and when not to use it. And oftentimes that's more something that you learn by doing. You know when you've played a note that doesn't fit. It's not just a dissonance. It's just a note that doesn't fit. And you know it doesn't fit. And so sometimes the dissonance can be ugly. Like, for example, if I play the B flat minor chord, and then if I'd stayed on a D in the melody, that's ugly. B flat minor with the D natural, no, that doesn't work. But if you make that a passing note between the minor third and the fourth, so make it a little chromatic passing tone, then it works. And of course, the E natural is always going to work, but if you play it on its own, that doesn't sound so good. But if you make it kind of like a passing note, now that works, or that works too. So, notes that don't fit can be made to fit by turning them into passing notes. So if you do play an ugly note, you're probably only a half step away from another tone that is going to fit. So you can turn it into a little passing note. So, if you play like a major 7 on a minor chord or a dominant chord, it's going to sound ugly, but you've got options either side of that note to kind of finish off the line by using one of those notes to basically make that ugly note into something not so ugly. For sure. Let's see what else we got. Paul says, I hear a guitar track in there along the lines of many a fusion player. Yeah, something like I was actually thinking something kind of a little bit John Schofield-y, or maybe George Benson. But for me, George Benson would have made this song too smooth. And I wanted it to kind of have a little bit of an edge. So maybe kind of less kind of smooth George Benson and maybe a little bit more John Schofield with a little bit more spice in the playing, maybe. I like that. When we're high, we can be closer. That can be taken a multitude of ways, Rich, for sure. John says he doesn't say that. He says closed voicings on horns can work in very short bursts. Imagine good Queen Bess with a D on trumpet and a D flat on tenor sax, resolving to C on the final turnaround at the end of the main phrase. Yeah, for sure. And there's other horn arrangements where, you've got with a trumpet at the top and a tenor sax at the bottom. And yes, they're a tone apart, and, it's a little bit jarring, a little bit dissonant, and they're close voiced. You could move them apart and go, okay, let's shove the F down the bottom. Well, that just sounds weird now. That's an interval of a minor seventh. Well, okay, let's try putting the F up an octave. Tenor sax, trumpet. You could do that, but I think the gap is too big now. So, therefore, maybe stick the fifth in there as well. Now we're talking. Now we're getting somewhere. If we put the flat 7 above the 5. Now that kind of sounds nice. Kind of sounds interesting. But maybe you've only got one tenor and one trumpet player. Well, you can't do that. So you have to think about your options, about the instrumentation that you've got. But yeah, closed voicings on horns can work, but you have to alternate between open and closed, and then sort of that in-between voicing style. So you're not kind of wide open, but you're not completely bunched up, cluster style. And I think good arrangers, like people like Tom Scott, who wrote a lot of horn arrangements for Steely Dan and other groups like the Phoenix Horns. He wrote a lot of charts for them. A lot of what he did is open and closed voicings. And of course, Tower of Power. Tower of Power horns are among some of the best horn charts ever written. A lot of those are in octaves, but when they're not in octaves, they're in fairly open voicing. They don't tend to go into closed voicing very much. But that's for another subject. Play an ugly note once is ugly. Play it again with feeling it's jazz. I think Beethoven said something similar. And he said to play a wrong note is forgivable. To play without passion is unacceptable. It's not just unforgivable, it's unacceptable. And I think he's right. There's a story that Herbie Hancock tells, and I think I've told this before, where he was playing a gig with Miles Davis. And they were playing So What, one of Miles's famous modal tunes. So it's modal, so there are no set chord changes particularly. Herbie would have been making chord voicings out of the notes of the Dorian scale, either on D minor, or on E flat minor. And so that's how he would have been doing his chord voicings. So it should have been pretty easy, right? Can't really go wrong particularly. However, on this one occasion, Herbie did go wrong. He just played a chord voicing that was just wrong. It didn't fit. It sounded ugly. And it was out of context. Now, here's the thing. Miles, what he did was he didn't hear it as an ugly chord that didn't fit, a mistake. He didn't hear it like that. He heard it just simply as a musical event. And he just picked out by his ear a few of the notes from the voicing that Herbie played and played them on his trumpet to make kind of what Herbie had done make musical sense. So when they came to the end of that set and they went backstage for the intermission, Herbie said, "Look, man, I messed up. I absolutely messed up. I played totally the wrong chord, and I must have wrecked your improvisation." And Miles looked at Herbie and apparently had a big a grin on his face and said, "Nah, man, You just played something and I made it fit. And that's how he saw it. And that taught Herbie a big lesson about music. Not just jazz, not just improvised music, but it taught him a lesson about music and about how you approach music. Quite often we are scared to death of playing the wrong thing, because we think that if we play the wrong thing and it doesn't fit, we're going to look foolish. But that's not what Miles heard. And that's what we shouldn't hear when we make mistakes. In music, in my opinion, there are no mistakes. There is no right or wrong. There is no such thing as a wrong note. There is a note that either fits or it doesn't fit. It's either consonant or it's dissonant, and that is all it is. It either adds color, it's an unusual color that you don't expect. But everything that you play, whether it's right notes or wrong notes, adds color to the music, right? So really, when it comes to improvisation, we should all have total freedom about our playing, because with that in mind, there is no wrong note. Therefore, you can play any note. It doesn't have to be a note from the scale. It doesn't have to be a note from the chord. It doesn't have to be a chord tone. It doesn't have to be any of those things. Now, all those things are good and all those things are useful, but they're not the be-all and end-all. There is no mistake. There is no wrong note. There's just a musical event. And what will make it work is what you do with that note. Do you just leave that wrong note hanging as an unresolved dissonance? If you do, play it with some confidence. Play it like you mean it, not like you kind of go and you kind of touched your finger on the hot pan of the stove and whoa, hot. And you recoil, you back off. If you do that, then everybody's going to think, oh, well, that was wrong, wasn't it? But if you play it with some confidence and turn that unintended note into something else, the start of another musical event, then nobody's going to notice, least of all your audience. And even if there are musicians in your audience, they're still not going to notice. What they're going to hear is they're going to go, that's an interesting note choice, but look what he did with it. That's cool. So that's my little discussion on instrument choice and kind of a little bit of improvisation kind of wrapped around that. But instrumentation of your song can make or break your song, even if then, playing all the right notes. They could be playing all the right notes. They could be stylistically accurate, but it's not the right instrument for the song. Just like with this blues song, maybe that sound is wrong. That guitar sound is wrong. It fits, it's kind of okay, but maybe, like John Hathwaite said, maybe it needs to be a cleaner sound, less, a bit less reverb and less distortion. Maybe that's a better choice for the guitar. As John Hathwaite says, one can play all the right notes, but not necessarily in the right order. Exactly. That's a great quote. I know who that's from as well. That's fantastic. All right, let's get to those questions, because I did promise those questions. So let's go and see. Sean Wyke says, can you talk a little about what radio stations are looking for in music versus the album track? Well, I'm not quite sure I understand the dichotomy that you have there between music versus the album track. I'm not quite sure what you're getting at there. But what are radio stations looking for? That's a really good question, and it's the right question to be asking, but it's a hard question because there's a lot of great songs out there, and not very many of them make it to radio airplay. Not many of them make it to radio airplay, which is why things like Spotify exist. Things like Spotify exist because not everybody can get their music onto the radio. You know, a lot of people talk about, you know, they even sell flipping tutorial courses on how to make your song a radio ready song, radio ready songs, radio ready album, radio ready mastering. There's entire courses branded with radio ready mix, radio ready master, radio ready music production, how to make your song radio ready, to the point where I'm kind of like, what are we saying here? When we say radio ready, what do we mean? Do we mean oven ready? Do we mean a microwavable dinner in music form? Is that what we mean? Well, I fear that that's what the music industry has become. That when we listen to the radio, we are listening to the aural and musical equivalent of a microwavable ready meal that you get from the supermarket that you slam in the microwave for 2 minutes and slop into your bowl and shovel down your gullet before you go to bed. That's what I fear that has happened to the radio broadcasting industry for music. And there's a lot of people and a lot of record labels and a lot of record executives and producers that are making a lot of money out of the aural equivalent of macaroni cheese pasta in a plastic tray that you shove in your microwave for 2 minutes and serve up into a bowl. You know, that's kind of what I think. And it's a bit sad, I think, because if I think back to the kind of music that burst onto the airwaves in the 1950s and 1960s that made artists like Elvis Presley, the Beatles, the Who, the Kinks, the Shadows, and great acts like that with great music, and they just burst onto the radio airwaves and everybody came alive. This was top quality music. This was great music. And people loved it. And people listened to it. People engaged with it. And people went out and bought the records. And what I fear happens now is that we listen rather passively to very, very manufactured music that we can consume very, very quickly. And we'll download it in the moment from Spotify or from iTunes because we'll go, you know, we will like it in the first 5 seconds or not. And from there, we'll maybe listen to it 2 or 3 times, and then it remains on our Spotify playlist on our iPhone or our Android phone or whatever device it is that you listen to your music on. It will remain on that playlist forever, and you may only listen to it 2 or 3 times. But I fear that that's what's happened to the music business and to what we now call radio-ready music. And it's just like, that's being sold by people that I know very well and who I like. They're selling radio-ready courses. Courses on how to make radio-ready music. And I gotta say, I don't necessarily like it. I see what they're saying, and I see what they're getting at and what they're trying to teach, and the concepts of recording correctly, getting good recordings, getting a good mix, getting a solid master that sounds great. Yeah, that's all really, really important. But I don't like this whole radio ready thing, because I think we may be potentially setting people up for maybe the wrong expectations, and also maybe the wrong understanding of what radio ready is. Um, but yeah, so what are radio stations looking for? They're looking for something that follows a formula. They're looking for music that follows a formula that has certain ingredients that they know, by and largely, the public will passively listen to very enjoyably. And unfortunately, that's what it is. It's passive listening. I know it doesn't sound very happy or glorious, but I'm concerned that that's where it's all heading in. All right, Carl's question. If a song contains a repeat symbol at the front of the first measure and at the back of the last measure, does that indicate a song that doesn't have an end? That's great. What it indicates is the whole song has to be played again. But you don't play it an infinite number of times unless the score has a marking that says repeat infinitely. If you only see the repeat sign at the start and the repeat sign at the end, you only play the repeat one time. So you play all the way through from the first repeat sign to the second repeat sign. You go back to the first repeat sign, you play all the way back to the second repeat sign, and then you carry on. If there's music on, if there is music in the score after that point, you keep going. You don't repeat that bit ad infinitum until the end of time. You only repeat that bit once. However, there are certain occasions where that last repeat sign will have a number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Well, this tells you you repeat this 5 times, and then when you're on it the 5th time, you jump to the next measure, the next bar, so you can continue playing, and you don't get stuck in an infinite Bermuda Triangle, musical Bermuda Triangle. But yeah, that's funny. I like that song. Very, very well thought through. I like it. Okay, Keith has had ice storms all day and his power is out as a result. Okay, that's sad, and the world is becoming a bit weird with things with the weather at the moment. I think we're pretty much in an unprecedented outbreak of tornadoes and ice storms and severe weathers, whether it's severely hot, severely cold, or you've got severe storms of all different kinds. Weather is weird at the moment. So yeah, hopefully he's got plenty of candles and something to keep warm by, hopefully. Talking about cellos. I love a good cello. When cello is played great, it sounds lovely. A friend of mine who is a bass player, she plays the funkiest bass. Oh my gosh, she is one of the funkiest bass players I've ever heard play. Her name is Jillian. But she also plays cello. And I went to one of her recitals that she did. And she played the Elgar Cello Concerto. And oh my gosh, she pulled every emotion off the page through that instrument and out to the audience in an incredibly powerful way. It was a masterful performance. And it left me speechless. And at the appropriate, very emotional points, it had me weeping like a baby. Because if you've ever heard the Elgar Cello Concerto, it is one of the most beautiful pieces written for that instrument ever. It really is. And the melody writing is unbelievable. I think some of Elgar's finest work of melody writing. It's technically challenging, but it's also emotionally challenging as well. And it just goes to show that classical music isn't just about saying, okay, the sheet music tells me to play these notes, these pitches with these durations, and sometimes I play loud, sometimes I play soft, and sometimes I start soft and I get a little bit louder, and then I go a little, and then I gradually get quieter again, and things like that. You know, and some people say you're just playing what the composer told you to play. And yes, you are doing that. However, just like a good script for a good monologue in a theatre. It's not just about the words on the page, it's about the emotion that you bring and the personality that you bring to those words, that you can have the audience experiencing a whole range of emotions as you are reciting this monologue. Or in the Elgar cello concerto, you're playing the notes on the page, but you're not just playing them, you're adding your own character, your own personality, and you're adding your own sense of emotion as well. And so cello is a gorgeous instrument. I love it. John Hathwaite said that's an example of wrong guitar tone. Yes, it probably would. But as I'm not really a guitar player, I don't really know what I'm looking for, and but I know a lot of good guitar players that really do, and I can discuss with them and say, hey, this is what I'm hearing in my head. What do you think? Do you think that is a good sound that we could go for? And they'll say either yes, or they'll say no, but what about this? And so we will play about with tones and guitar sounds until both of us are happy with it, quite often. And sometimes the guitar player will just have exactly the tone that I want without really asking. they'll just know. And so I trust the judgment of a good guitar player who's got a lot of experience, that they will be able to listen to the track and go, it needs this guitar tone, this amp, it needs this microphone for the amp, it needs this setup. And then they'll go ahead and do it, and it will sound fantastic. And I have very little involvement in it, other than, they know what to do. I'm not one of those guys. I'm not a guitar player. Picking up the right colors for your painting are as important as the idea and the brush used. Correct. Could not agree more. And this is where AI, maybe, as we were talking last week a wee bit about AI, maybe that's the part that AI may never understand. If I said to ChatGPT, write me a cello concerto in the style of Elgar, would it be able to inspire an emotional response in me like Elgar's music would? I don't know that it would. I'm not convinced that it would. I just farted. There you go. Any more questions? Because we've got about 7 minutes to go. And I'd like to get one more question in, if at all possible. We don't have a lot of people here tonight. We've only got like 15 people, which is a bit of a shame. But I did kind of advertise this at the last minute because I have been out of the studio pretty much the entire day. And I didn't really tell you guys this at the top. So I will. My cellulitis infection that was in my leg and I had reported had cleared up. It had. That's true. The infection is no longer in my leg. That's the good part. The bad part is the infection has relocated itself to my foot. So the reason why my left foot from the ankle downwards is still very, very swollen is because the infection has moved. It's no longer in my leg, it's in my foot. It's actually in the top of my foot, which means I can still walk. I can weight bear, I can stand, I can sit, I can walk a short distance. I can't walk loads yet because I'm still kind of recovering my fitness from the leg part of the infection. Now it's moved into my foot. I can walk. I can walk up the street a bit. I can maybe do about halfway up the street and then I'm done. It's sore after that. Will I be able to make it to Ziggy's meetup that is in about an hour after your show? Maybe. That would be very late for me, but maybe. I might be able to. But yeah, I know we would normally have an after show Zoom. We would normally do that. But if you guys would rather just hang fire and go to is it the Pittsburgh or is it the Pennsylvania meetup? I can never remember which one Ziggy's is. Because that would be at 2 a.m. for me. And I don't mind kind of, finishing at 1 and then, like we normally do it and then see how it goes. But yeah. If you want to do an after show, Mike, then by all means do one. If you don't, that's just fine as well. I don't mind that. But yeah, if you want to join the meetup, then everybody should. Could somebody post a link to it, please? Because I don't have it to hand. Okay, yes, it is the Pennsylvania. Okay, if somebody's got the link to that, could they post it, please? One of my moderators, that would be a great help, and then that would steer everybody over to there. And I think that's 9 p.m., which would be 2 a.m. UK time. I think that's correct. Thank you, Billy. And Mike says he can launch a Zoom if you want. Yeah, maybe we could do that. We could kind of go over to Mike's to start with, to Mike's Zoom, and then if folks want to go on to Ziggy's meetup, then they can certainly do that as well. That would be cool. Alrighty, so we got 4 minutes left. John says John Hathwaite says, because there's 2 Johns, I have to remember that. When one has access to other musicians, it makes life easier because they have experience. The home studio musician may be limited in this regard. That could be true. That could be true. You could be kind of limited to, maybe you do have access to those musicians, but they are professionals maybe, and they work. Music is their livelihood, so you would want to pay them, right? I certainly pay all of my guys, unless they say, hey, no, it's fine. It's fine. I'll do it because, you're my mate. And I have some very high profile musicians that do come and do that for me. But for the most part, I pay everybody. But not everybody's going to have the finances to be able to do that. And so if you're in that position where you don't, then I think asking the right questions about, okay, I want to do maybe a fake trumpet solo for this. What should I be looking out for? What mistakes? Well, if you're doing a fake trumpet part, you got to remember it's a blown instrument, which means don't just play an endless string of notes, because that's fake instrument spot number 1. If you're playing an endless string of notes, or you're playing some really, really absurdly long notes that nobody could play unless they were circular breathing, and most don't circular breathe, you've got to give them space to breathe. So give them space to breathe. And so this goes for if you're doing an arrangement for a horn section. Give them space to breathe. They're going to need it. If you're writing for orchestra and you're writing for woodwinds, give them space to breathe. They will need to. So organize your phrasing accordingly. Remember that they can't hold notes on indefinitely, or they cannot blow continuously to make lots and lots of notes. They have to stop at least for a very short period to get air back into their system. Even those that are circular breathing, you have to get fresh air into that system. So think about that. Think about the range and register of the instrument, and think about what actually might be possible, because some instruments, like trumpet, you can't really do, a big wide leap. That sounds fine on a guitar. That's a major 7th. And actually, that's not going to be too hard on a guitar. But on a trumpet, if you try doing that on a trumpet, that's hard to get accurate. Why? Because it's not just a case of moving 2 fingers, like I just did on the keyboard. On the valves, you actually have, part of making the note is your lip. You're doing this, essentially, into a trumpet to make the note. And then you are using the valves and the amount of lip pressure to make the note. So, going, as you can see, I'm finding that hard. I can maybe do thirds or fourths. And somebody really, really, really good, somebody like Arturo Sandoval, for example, can do it quite easily. But, I mean, there's a guy that, you know, has more than put in his 10,000 hours. I haven't on the trumpet. I've maybe put in a couple of 100 hours on the trumpet. So, you know, I'm limited to what I can do. I certainly couldn't go, you know, I can do a little bit. I can do a little bit of arpeggios, but doing them really fast, not really possible. So think about those kind of things. Neil Thompson said, regarding instrumentation, remember Pat Boone in a metal mood? I listened to many of the tracks. Most covers sound awful, but his best ones, he completely overhauled the song. Yes, quite often a very, very, very good arranger can do that. They can actually take something that's maybe not so good and make it a lot better. And as Rich says here, he says, a breath controller will learn you real quick. Yes, I have one. I have an Akai Iwi, and for sure it will teach you how to do saxophone parts and trumpet parts and stuff. Sean White says, that's what I love about Studio One. There's a community here of professionals that help with tracking or help with writing playable parts. For sure. Definitely. And on that note, we will end the show here. If you would like to join me and Mike on the after show Zoom, then please do. And then I think we'll all rock over to the Studio One meetup after that. All right, so come on over and join us. And otherwise, I will see you on Sunday for Sunday Night Live. Now, please remember, it is going to be Easter Sunday, so I'm not expecting necessarily that everybody will want to be here. But if you would like to, I will be doing a show, and it may be just a short one, just so that I don't take everybody away from their families. But if you guys are up for that, then there will be a show running, and it'd be nice to see you anyway, even if it is for like 30 minutes instead of the full hour. All right, folks, I will see you on Sunday. Good night.